The trial of the prosecutor versus Dominic Ongwen continued from 31st October to 29th November 2019 at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. During this time, a total of 4 witnesses testified before the chamber about the Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, Joseph Kony, and Dominic Ongwen. Specifically, the Ongwen defense team called 3 witnesses, while the prosecution recalled 1 witness who had previously testified. Dominic Ongwen, the alleged former commander of the senior brigade of the LRA, is accused of 70 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity allegedly committed during a widespread and systematic attack directed against the civilian population of northern Uganda. The alleged attacks, from at least 1st July 2002 to 31st December 2005, included attacks against the civilian population in Lukodi, Bajule, Odek, and Abok IDP camps between October 2003 and June 2004. During this evidentiary block, the Ongwen defense team called Dr. Eric Awich Ochen, D26P00114, who testified about his social work and social administration experience working with the GUSCO, Gulu Support the Children Organization, World Vision, and Save the Children. In these organizations, he offered psychological support and enhanced opportunity for resettlement and reintegration into society to former abducted children and adults who were coming from the bush. Dr. Chen described the difference between GUSCO and World Vision.
So the difference between Gulu and World Vision at that time was that in terms of coverage, in terms of focus, GUSCO was receiving children below 18 years from Gulu district. World Vision was given the responsibility of receiving children and also older adults, because even we were also getting cases of adults returning from rebel captivity or escaping. So World Vision was given the task to receive children from all other districts, in Acholi, in Lango, in Teso, and West Nile, another part of Uganda, and also the older adults. And World Vision had the facilities and the structures. I remember there were sleeping quarters for girls different, for boy children different, and then also for the older adults different. And World Vision also had staff who spoke different other languages for the region, who could support the other children from elsewhere. I remember there was somebody who spoke Madi and Lango and a few other languages. Although Lango and Acholi are close, but still sometimes there are a few differences here and there. In terms of the approach to rehabilitation, GUSCO was using more of conventional psychosocial support. I remember when of course, when I joined later, that we used to get psychologists come and train us how to approach children, how to help children. And there was a prominent one from Norway called Elizabeth, I think Jarek or something like that. She used to come occasionally to support, to do in-house training for staff. So it was more of something close to narrative exposure therapy, I would say. So it was more of conventional. And then also, GUSCO also gave opportunity for children who wanted to be supported, traditionally, because the actual justice system also has its own way of handling young people and children who have been away from home for a long time or who found themselves trapped on things like maybe being involved in killings when they were not, it wasn't in their interest, and other such things. So the GUSCO management allowed the children in GUSCO, for those who wanted traditional cleansing system or ceremonies, for that to be done. And I remember on several occasions, children would be escorted to their home villages, especially after the family has already been placed. For areas which were near town, it was possible to take the children to their original home. For others, whose parents were within the internally displaced persons camps, those ceremonies would take place there. For World Vision, it was more Christian approach. It was more of what I would call a Christian approach to counseling and providing psychosocial support, which involve prayers, prayers almost every day, and preaching the gospel through, preaching the Bible and encouraging the language of forgiveness and repentance, and I think that was more of the approach that World Vision used at that time.
Dr. Chen further testified about how fearful and distrustful of people the returnees, that is the former abducted, were when they came from the bush. The returnees underwent extensive medical checkups and medical treatment was given when needed. So before rehabilitation began, they were given food, clothing, and a place to stay, and they also had to be questioned by the UPDF. Regarding the number of children that went through rehabilitation in Gusco and World Vision, Dr. Chen recalled that between 1994 and 2006, there had been about 7,000 children that had passed through Gusco centers. He further noted that in World Vision, while he wasn't aware of the exact number, the number was much higher than in Gusco because World Vision catered for a wider group of people. Dr. Chen also discussed the importance of rehabilitation process for the returnees.
The general knowledge is that based on our work with communities, because maybe what I may also note is that many of the organizations that were working with young people also had, with formerly abducted children, also had community-based staff. Some of them were called community-based counselors, community volunteer counselors, psychosocial support practitioners, community caregivers. Different names were given. Cusco, for example, had CVCs, community volunteer counselors. World Vision had community caregivers. So these were more parasocial workers at community level who were trained and given basic skills to do immediate and basic assessment of the psychosocial needs of mainly those children who went straight to the community, but also to continue providing basic support for the reintegration of those children who went through the reception center. And the information we got from most of these people directly and of course through research over the years is that those who went through Cusco and World Vision tended to cope much better. They were more productive in one way or another. They look at their life more positively with a lot more hope compared to those who went directly home, who never had the chance to get any kind of psychosocial support, who never had the chance to get any kind of vocational training. Because for some of the children who went through Gusco Center as well, those who were abducted when they were still younger or World Vision, and they'd come back when they were, let's say, 14, 16, 18, 19. They were given the opportunity either to go back to basic formal education, and we've had cases of young children who studied up to the university, Makerere University, Ngolo University. There are cases of children, boys and girls, young people now, I would say. And some were given opportunity to learn a basic skill, vocational skill, carpentry, tailoring, mechanics, and some of those other courses with different levels of success. And so those one had something to start with. And some of them were also given what we call seed money or some little financial facilitation, let's say $100. I remember some women, especially the child mothers, were given about $100, and some of those used that to start off many businesses, which became successful. Others were not as successful. So the level of support then provided to those who went through the reception centers was higher, or was higher, and they were also known. And at some point, Uganda government, of course, had already established the Amnesty Commission based on the Amnesty Act 2000, I think. And Amnesty Commission also went ahead to re-register all the children and the young people and other adults who had been abducted and gone through the reception centers. And they were re-registered with a view to being given additional support. And I think they were given other items like mattresses, blankets, and some money. I can't remember the exact amount of money now. So what I'm trying to say is that the inability of those young people or children who went straight to the community to be known also deprived them of help and support, which could have helped them to cope better in the community.
The Ongwen defense team also called two expert witnesses, Dr. Dickens Sakena and Dr. Emilio Ovuga, two clinical psychiatrists who interacted and assessed the mental well-being of the accused. The two also co-wrote and produced 4 medical and psychological reports on this matter between February 2016 and January 2019. Dr. Akena, a medical doctor who specialized as a psychiatrist, received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD from various universities, and is also a senior lecturer at the Department of Psychology at Makerere University. He has conducted research and published many articles and papers about mental illness and its assessment in the field of psychiatry and mental health. Dr. Akena has years of experience assessing and treating different mental illness patients, including former child soldiers. During his testimony, Dr. Akena explained that when assessing his clients for mental illness, he normally uses different rating scales and screening instruments to check for any symptoms or diagnosis. Once the symptoms are detected and a diagnosis made, then he, as a psychiatrist, will gauge how bad the mental illness is and will recommend the proper care to his clients. Dr. Akena also explained that it is important for psychiatrists to be aware of subtle differences when assessing mental illnesses in patients, and factors such as religion, cultural context, and education level should be given attention in detail and considered during assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of patients. He further noted that transcultural psychiatry is important because knowing that mental illness manifests differently in different cultures is fundamental in noticing symptoms and treating it accordingly. Specifically, in the Ongwen case, Dr. Akena confirmed that he and Dr. Vuga had approximately 15 to 18 sessions of 2 to 3 hours to assess the mental state of the accused at the detention center.
Talk to us about what your methodology was in the Ongwen case. And then after you've spoken, I will ask some follow-up questions if you have not touched on them already.
Okay. So we used what we call a clinical interview or a clinical exam. And usually that's what we do in clinical settings. You need to have some baseline knowledge about mental health and the way you ask the questions. Then you form a hypothesis in your head, and then you interact with the client. And this interaction is informed by existing literature about diagnostics, criteria, or something like that. So you sit, and we interacted with the client, meaning we asked him questions, he provided answers. We also observed the client. So physical observation of clients in mental health is actually extremely important. You must see the client in totality, head to toe preferably. The setting in which you sit, how you sit, which direction you face the door, who comes into the office first and not the other, also depends on how you would get that outcome. Then so after that interaction, we would record that information on a piece on paper. Would let him know that would be writing down these things and that it's 100% confidential. And the information that we get from there is strictly for his own good or the good of the court, but not for public consumption, for example. And then we got what we call collateral history, because we wanted to be sure that whatever it is that we were receiving from him was appropriate. So we made attempts to interview a number of clients, a number of people who had been with him. We made requests to that effect, and we managed to get hold of four individuals, 2 males and 2 females, if I can remember. But they were all interviewed at different points in time. And the reason we did that was that we wanted to corroborate some of the information that he was giving us. Then after we've gotten that information, then we go back and refer to text, written text in textbooks and manuals. And we then come up with a diagnosis. And that diagnosis then helps us to make recommendations based on that. You may have seen that I think one of our reports, we wrote a report for clinical purposes only. So a lot of it was medical jargon. And the reason we did that was in one of the interactions, we actually figured out that the client was laboring under severe forms of illness for which there was need for treatment. So we made those recommendations, and then we passed them over to the relevant authorities with the hope that he would get treated. I think he received some care based on that. But I also think that at the detention center, there were other mental health professionals who were interacting with him regularly. So we made attempts to engage with them. We were successful on one attempt to basically alert them to the fact that there were some things that we saw for which they needed to attend to medically, urgently. We also, as a follow-up, we wanted to know what medications he was taking and why, for example. Because later on during the assessments, he started describing to us some things that looked or sounded like side effects to some of the medications that we give in our clinical practice. So we just wanted to know that. I think somewhere along the way, we were able to establish those. So I appreciate the critiques that we received from our colleagues. I think they were helpful in helping us to shape our report better, but also helping us to understand the situation better. But we did what we could do to the best of our ability to be able to get this information in a clinical setting, which is very different from research setting. In a research setting, you have many other ways of assessing clients who you deal with. So we did this for purposes of just not providing information to the court, but also as medical practitioners, we also ethically obliged to be able to identify illness and make recommendations that would help to alleviate the suffering of individuals in whatever circumstances they are in.
Regarding the mental state of the accused, Dr. Akena confirmed that after assessing the accused, he and Dr. Vuga saw symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, suicidal ideation, and dissociative disorder. After Dr. Akena's testimony, expert witness Dr. Vuga was called by the defense to testify. Dr. Emilio Ovuga received his bachelor's, master's, and PhD from various universities, focusing on suicidology and suicide prevention. He was a practicing psychiatrist who worked in various hospitals, assessing mental ill patients and offering them care. He was also a senior lecturer at various universities such as Gulu and Makerere universities, among other universities. He also published many articles and papers. Dr. Vuga also served as Dean of the Faculty of Medicine at Gulu University and held various positions at Makerere University. Dr. Vuga is a researcher, medical practitioner, an administrator, a mentor, and an educator with a career span of over 30 years of experience in the medical field of psychiatry and mental health. Dr. Vuga also testified about assessing the accused together with Dr. Akena. He also defined some terms used in their report, such as dissociative amnesia, obsessive compulsory disorder, CHIN, PTSD, appetitive aggression, and mass trauma in Northern Uganda. When asked whether dissociative disorder influenced the accused's ability during the charged period to make judgment of what is right and wrong, Dr. Vuga answered in the affirmative, explaining that with corroborative sources of information, which he didn't have, dissociative disorders of oral experiences would have a significant impact on Ongwen's moral ability to decide to tell right from wrong. Dr. Vuga explained that the accused told him that he used to go blank when he was about to go to battle. So that means he was unwilling to go to battle, so he dissociates by going blank to absolve himself from the burden of telling right from wrong. Dr. Vuga also responded to criticisms that the accused might be faking his mental illness.
This is all coming from Mr. Ongwen, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
All of it.
yes.
I want to tackle that question of this subjective account.
Mm-hmm.
You've told us that the increasing detail, floridity of Mr. Ongwen's description of his mental state over his encounters with you is perfectly consistent with him gaining trust and being able to talk to you. And you're looking at it, I suggest, from the point of view of a treating psychiatrist. And you are ignoring the equal possibility, although you know it has been raised in these proceedings, that in fact Mr. Ongwen is not ill, that he is, to use Professor Mazet's word, faking bad, malingering, that he considers that a mental health defense, if I can use that word, may be a way of escaping criminal liability, and that he is changing his story to you in order to provide you with the material you need to make the necessary diagnosis. You're aware that there's that issue in this case, aren't you?
I am aware, and I did talk about it yesterday. Dr. Kenna talked about it the other day. Let me clarify it as follows. To simply, for a witness to come and sit and accuse someone of faking without having had contact with that person was not fair. And for that position to keep coming repeatedly is also not fair. It is not fun for any individual to feel sad, to feel there is someone else similar to him who is controlling his behavior. It is not fun, by fun meaning an enjoyable experience, for somebody to see his brain split in two, or to see the world split in two. The world on the left referring to bad things, the world on the right referring to good heavenly things. Those sets of experiences are not fun for people to go through with or to live with. We are able to sit here, we are able to stand in this room and make those allegations because we ourselves have not experienced the same experiences Mr. Ongwen has gone through. I always tell my students, if someone says they have never known happiness, it is that person who has not known happiness. And once we ourselves also have the chance, unfortunate chance, of getting through that experience, then we will see the unfairness in which we have ridiculed their experiences.
About the accused's split personalities, Dominic A and Dominic B, Dr. Ovuga said that the two personalities existed way before the charged period of 2002 to 2005 and were active during the charged period. He explained that the accused described Dominic A as cheerful, social, happy, and helpful, while Dominic B is hostile and combative. Dr. Ovuga also testified about Mr. Ongwen's maturity. The expert witness said that Mr. Ongwen's abduction destroyed his initial development, mentally and physically. The accused's life development was cut short by his abduction, and his transition into adulthood was curtailed. Dr. Ovuga and Dr. Akena concluded that Ongwen's development was arrested at the age of 8, 9, or 10 years old. The prosecution had requested the chamber for Professor Weyerstall Post to sit in the courtroom, while defense expert witnesses Dr. Ovuga and Dr. Akena gave their testimonies. Professor Weyerstall Post also produced a report following the testimonies of the two defense expert witnesses. Professor Weyerstall Post is a professor of clinical psychology at Hamburg's Medical School, University of Applied Sciences and Medical University. He is also a licensed psychotherapist with both teaching and research experience and has published several reports in various medical journals. The professor had previously testified for the prosecution, and he was recalled during this evidentiary block to comment on what the defense expert witnesses had testified about, as well as to comment on the reports they produced. Professor Weyerstall Post said that there was need in forensic mental health evaluation not only to rely on the information the patient gives, but also to rely on multi-source of information in order to corroborate what the patient is saying so as to give proper treatment. Professor Weyerstall Post elaborated that, specifically in this case, the multi-source information comes from 1. Psychometric testing, 2. Testimonies from the people around the accused, and 3. Words of the accused, which is compared with those of other people who have similar symptoms in the field of psychiatry. The professor heavily criticized the two defense expert witnesses on how they conducted the mental assessment and diagnosis of the accused, as well as the methodology used in their reports.
Now, if I can ask you to maybe step out of your own role at the moment, could you give us an objective assessment of comparison a person with who's interviewed 20 or 30 XLRA with the collective experience, you've seen the resumes, of Professor Ovuga and Dr. Kana? Just an honest assessment. This is not a judgmental question. It's a question if you could step out honestly and say what you think.
I think qualified work doesn't solely depend on the years you spent doing this work. What I would do is I would compare the work that has been done by someone who did it the 21st or 31st time and compare the work to the work of those people who have worked in this culture maybe for decades. And then I would do it in the same way as I did it in my report. I would compare it to general principles and see whom of the two do their work more in accordance with common guidelines and whose work is in this way more evidence-based, more founded. And you see, the problem is I don't want to make I don't want to get in this role to do in this personal, on this personal level. You see, I appreciate the work that has been done by Professor Ovuga and Dr. Akena. I respect them as honorable colleagues, and I do not say that they are not qualified to do this work, and I also would not say that I'm not qualified to do this work. For me, the only point I'm making is that we have a report here, and we have guidelines, and we have standardized criteria, and these standardized criteria are not made by Professor Ovuga, and they are not made by Professor Weierstahl-Pues, but they are common accepted guidelines that have been made by professionals, and these were discussed on an international basis. And so therefore, it's not important if Professor Ovuga or Dr. Kena are a Choli, and it's not important that I'm a Muzungu, but I think it's rather important that we compare the work that has been done to general principles, and then we can come to a conclusion. And I think based on this conclusion, I would say that this particular report, and not Professor Ovuga, not Akena as an individual per se, but I think that this report is not matching the quality criteria that we would expect from a forensic or from a proper forensic report.
Is it fair to conclude that your general conclusions on the report were based, or your general critique was a critique of the conclusions of the diagnoses of the report?
My critique refers to the diagnosis, but also the methodological assessment and the scientific basis of the report.
Okay, thank you. Now, I understand that it's 3 parts. However, would it be fair to conclude that Professor de Jong's report, which on the issue of diagnoses reached almost, if not almost the same ones as Professor Akena and Ovuga, in regard to major depressive disorder, PTSD, and dissociative disorder, he was the court-appointed expert in this case, that his report was also sloppy?
I have already commented, also gave a comment on the report of Professor de Jong last time I think I was here, and also as part of my, no, but you haven't been here, of course, but in my first report. Okay. So I've already mentioned there that it doesn't mean, it doesn't meet relevant points that usually should have been addressed.
Okay. But however, the question was, and I've read the reports, all of them, yes, is would you describe it as sloppy? That's the question.
No, I wouldn't describe it as sloppy, because I think I also would say that the report doesn't fulfill the doesn't meet fundamental requirements.
Whose report now?
Also Professor de Jong. I think both reports are not sufficient to give clear evidence on what has happened in the charge period, because we are still dealing with the charge period, and none of the reports really assessed the mental health status precisely in the alleged or in the charge period. None of the reports has specifically focused on the alleged crimes. So this information, which is absolutely relevant in this case, doesn't appear anywhere. So this means they are both insufficient, in my opinion. But in comparison between the 2 reports, and in comparison to what fundamental shortcomings and contradictions that can be found in the report of Professor Ovuga and Dr. Akena, I think it's rather outstanding.
All right, so it would be fair to me to sum up that adjective, which was a series, that adjective of sloppy applies to Professor Akena's, Professor Ovuga and Dr. Akena's report in your position, but that particular adjective does not apply to Professor de Jong's report. That's what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Okay.
Defense expert witness Dr. Vuga was recalled by the defense to respond to the report and testimony of Professor Weistel Post. Dr. Vuga expressed his displeasure about how Professor Weistel Post criticized this report that he produced after assessing the accused. Professor Vuga noted that as professionals in the field of psychology, Professor Weistel Post shouldn't have criticized his report with degrading terminology such as sloppy or deviant, but instead he should have suggested how the report could have been improved. Dr. Vuga further explained that this report wasn't written for scientific purposes, but was written for understanding of the complex clinical picture that they observed while assessing the accused.
Psychometric tests are useful, but as I said on Thursday or Friday, and as Dr. Aken also said, we have to have a utility, economy of scale, so as to decide whether it is useful under a particular circumstance or not. They are useful. But our not having used it, I hope, does not invalidate our observations. Let me explain it this way. I trained as an undergraduate qualifying in 76, and then master's program in 81. At that time in Uganda, we did not have the luxury of clinical tests, rating scales. We were trained to use all of our 5 senses plus the 6th one, which is intuition, to make judgment, clinical judgment of clinical information that we meticulously were trained to elicit. So, I believe in the utility of clinical methodology with or without rating scales. But as I said, as far as I'm concerned, we didn't think the use of rating scales was highly indicated in this case because we were interacting with the source of information, observing him for 2 hours, 3 hours, whenever we went to the detention center. We made observations, swings in mood, changes in behavior, and so on. And we were being criticized and being asked whether a mood of happiness, being jolly, and so on was consistent with diagnosis of depression. The rebuttal witness, as a psychologist, should have known that there are a set of what we call psychological defense mechanisms, one of which applies to what we are being told is not consistent with the diagnosis of depression, that is, being jolly, being happy, socializing well is, and it arises from children's experiences in the bush. They were trained, so to speak, to engage in reaction formation. Reaction formation is a psychological phenomenon that enables an individual to respond to a situation in the opposite direction. For example, if I didn't like Mr. Gampet and his team, I don't think he minds, because after I completed my testimony.
You did say if.
Yeah, if.
Yeah.
We had a short chat after my encounter with him on Friday. So we are friends. So supposing I didn't like him and his team, that would arouse a lot of anxiety, fear, feelings of insecurity in me. And to fight off these negative feelings, I then unknowingly my mind switches my attitude and response to him to that of liking, being friendly, socializing, and so on. So reaction formation helped the child soldiers to cope with their feelings of grief, loss, sadness, and so on. And the rebuttal witness should have known this. And it shouldn't have been difficult for him to understand.
Dr. Vuga addressed several criticisms, such as not having enough corroborative evidence from people around the accused during the charge period 2002-2005, whether the accused is faking his mental illnesses or not, the fluctuating mental illness symptoms of the accused. Dr. Vuga further said that his own conclusions in his report saying the accused had mental illness symptoms were similar to what Dr. De Jong had found. Dr. De Jong was Mr. Ongwen's treating physician in the detention center, who had assessed the accused and concluded that the accused suffered from mental disorder symptoms of PTSD and depressive disorders. Dr. Vuga recalled that De Jong used psychometric scale called the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale to assess the accused and came to the same conclusion as he and Dr. Kenna as far as depression and PTSD are concerned. This evidentiary block also marked the end of the Ongwen defense presentation of evidence before the chamber. The Ongwen defense team had 63 witnesses in total. 54 gave their testimony either in the courtroom or via video link, while the other 9 witnesses were Rule 68-3, meaning their prior recorded testimony were admitted into evidence. The trial will resume on Tuesday, 10th March 2020, with the commencement of closing statements from the parties and participants. The parties and participants were ordered to file their closing briefs by 26 February 2020.